The morning sky over Earth turned black as death itself. Thousands of Zephyrian warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their massive hulls stretching for kilometers like metallic mountains floating in the void. The sheer scale of the invasion fleet was overwhelming, a testament to the military might of an empire that had crushed 47 civilizations before setting their sights on humanity. Commander Vex Thor stood on the bridge of the flagship Dominion's edge, his four compound eyes glittering with predatory satisfaction as he gazed down at the blue-green world below. His chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the harsh bridge lighting, each segment polished to perfection, a warrior's armor earned through decades of conquest. The scars across his thorax told stories of battles fought and worlds claimed for the Empire. Preliminary scans complete, Commander, reported Subcommander Crixtel, her claws dancing across holographic displays. Planet designation Earth shows primitive technological development. Nuclear weapons detected, but no significant orbital defenses. Electromagnetic emissions suggest scattered population centers with limited coordination. Vex Thor's mandibles clicked rhythmically, the Zephyrian equivalent of laughter. Resistance assessment? Minimal to negligible, sir. These humans barely possess crude space flight capabilities. No energy shields, no plasma weaponry, no gravitational manipulation technology. Their most advanced weapons appear to be chemical explosives and kinetic projectiles. Crixtel paused, consulting her readings. Biological scans indicate they're carbon-based bipeds with endoskeletal structure, physically weak compared to most sentient species we've encountered. The bridge fell silent except for the humming of shipboard systems. Vex Thor studied the tactical displays showing Earth's major population centers, sprawling cities connected by primitive transportation networks. It was almost disappointing. After the fierce resistance they'd faced on Culver Prime and the devastating siege of the crystalline cities of Zektar, this looked like it would be a simple cleanup operation. Deploy the fear protocols, Vex Thor commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had personally overseen the subjugation of entire star systems. I want every major population center on this planet to witness our arrival. Let them see the futility of resistance before we begin processing operations. The fleet moved with mechanical precision, spreading across Earth's orbital space like a dark web. Each ship was a fortress of death, bristling with plasma cannons and quantum disruptors capable of turning mountains to glass. The humans had never seen technology like this, wouldn't even understand what they were looking at until it was far too late. Within minutes, the first wave of atmospheric penetrators launched from the fleet's belly, their hulls glowing cherry red as they screamed through Earth's atmosphere. These weren't just transport ships, they were mobile command centers, each carrying a full battalion of Zephyrian shock troops and enough firepower to level a human city. The dropships hit Earth's major cities simultaneously. New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, one by one, humanity's greatest urban centers fell under the shadow of Zephyrian might. Defensive responses were pathetic. Primitive fighter aircraft that couldn't even scratch Zephyrian shields, ground-based missiles that simply bounced off advanced armor plating. By sunset on the first day, 17 major cities were under alien control. Processing centers were already being constructed, massive structures designed to catalog, sort, and ship human slaves to work camps across the Zephyrian Empire. It was a well-practiced routine, refined through decades of conquest. Resistance collapse in primary targets is ahead of schedule, Crixtel reported with satisfaction. Human military forces are retreating or surrendering en masse. Their governments are already requesting terms of capitulation. Vex Thor allowed himself a moment of pride. Another world, another victory. In his 4 decades of service to the Empire, he had never met a species that could stand against Zephyrian military doctrine for more than a few days. Humans, it seemed, would be no exception. But far from the burning cities and the scenes of surrender, in a small campground nestled deep in the Montana wilderness, something was stirring that would change everything. Something the Zephyrian Empire, for all their advanced technology and military might, had never encountered before. Something they were utterly unprepared for. A human child who simply refused to give up. 8-year-old Emma Rodriguez was roasting marshmallows over the campfire when the first shadows fell across Glacier National Park. The family camping trip had been her father's idea, a chance to disconnect from the digital world and reconnect with nature before Emma started 3rd grade. Her parents, Maria and Carlos, had been city people their whole lives, but Emma's grandfather had insisted she learn the old ways. Technology fails, Mija, Abuelo Miguel would tell her during their weekend wilderness expeditions. But the forest never lies. It never breaks down. You learn to read it, and it will keep you alive. Now, as alien warships blotted out the afternoon sun, those words proved prophetic. While her parents frantically worked their dead cell phones and tried to coax life from their battery-powered radio, Emma felt an eerie calm settle over her. The forest around their campsite had gone completely silent. No bird songs, no rustling leaves, no distant deer calls. Even the insects had stopped buzzing. In the 2 years since Abuelo had started teaching her wilderness survival, she'd learned that when nature went quiet, it meant predators were near. Big predators. Emma, stay close to the tent, her mother called, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. Carlos, why isn't the radio working? The emergency broadcast should. All electronics are down, her father muttered, shaking the device uselessly. It's like an EMP went off. Emma slipped away while her parents debated whether to stay or try hiking back to civilization. She moved the way Abuelo had taught her, weight on the balls of her feet, testing each step before committing, becoming part of the forest rather than fighting against it. Her small size, which made her the shortest kid in her class, became an advantage as she melted between pine trees and granite boulders. She had always been different from other children. Where her classmates saw scary darkness in the woods, Emma found comfort in the green shadows. Where they heard threatening sounds, she heard the forest's heartbeat. She could track white-tailed deer for miles without losing the trail, identify edible plants by their scent alone, and move through thick underbrush without making a sound. Her friends thought she was weird. Her teachers worried she spent too much time alone. But Abuelo understood. He had been a reconnaissance specialist in Vietnam, trained in jungle warfare and survival tactics. When he looked at Emma, he saw something that reminded him of the war. A natural-born scout with instincts that couldn't be taught. In war, Mija, he would say during their weekly camping trips, the smallest person can be the most dangerous because nobody sees them coming. David beat Goliath not because he was stronger, but because Goliath never expected the attack to come from below. Those lessons proved invaluable as Emma found her perfect observation post, a thick-branched pine tree overlooking the main campground. She climbed 30 feet up and settled into a natural platform formed by intersecting branches, her small frame barely visible among the pine needles. From her perch, she watched the first Zephyrian scout ships descend like mechanical vultures. The vessels were sleek and predatory, their hulls reflecting the forest canopy in a way that suggested advanced camouflage technology. They landed with barely a whisper of displaced air, far more sophisticated than any human aircraft she'd ever seen. The creatures that emerged defied every monster from her worst nightmares. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, their bodies covered in segmented chitinous armor that gleamed like polished obsidian. For compound eyes swept the area with methodical precision while razor-sharp mandibles clicked in what might have been communication. Energy weapons hung from their equipment harnesses, humming with barely contained power. Emma watched them search the abandoned campground with military efficiency. They moved in perfect coordination, never leaving their backs exposed, checking every tent and vehicle with robotic thoroughness. When they found her family's campsite, they spent long minutes examining the still warm ashes of their campfire and the scattered camping gear. But they never looked up. For all their advanced technology and tactical training, they searched in 2 dimensions while Emma observed from the 3rd. As the sun set and more scout teams arrived, Emma began to understand something profound. These aliens were soldiers, disciplined, deadly, but following predictable patterns. They were apex predators from their own world. But this wasn't their world. This was hers. And for the first time since the invasion began, Emma Rodriguez smiled. For 3 days, Emma became a shadow in her own domain, transforming from a frightened child into something far more dangerous, a dedicated student of war. She moved through the forest like a wraith, following game trails she had memorized during countless camping trips with Abuelo, observing the alien invaders with the patience of a born predator. The Zephyrians, she quickly learned, were creatures of rigid habit. They established patrol routes with mathematical precision, timing their movements down to the minute. Every 6 hours, they rotated their watch positions. Every 12 hours, they conducted equipment checks. Every 24 hours, they transmitted reports to their command structure using communication devices that emitted a distinctive blue pulse. Emma cataloged these patterns like her grandfather had taught her to track animal behavior. Every creature has habits, Mija, Abuelo had said during a deer hunting expedition the previous fall. Learn the habits and you control the outcome. From her network of observation posts, carefully selected trees and rock formations that offered perfect sightlines while remaining invisible from below, Emma began to understand her enemy's weaknesses. The aliens' armor looked impenetrable, but she noticed the joints where the chitinous plates met. At the neck, where their helmets connected to their chest pieces, there was a gap barely 2 inches wide. At the legs, where their thigh armor hinged with their knee protection, another vulnerable spot revealed itself. Their vision was perhaps their greatest limitation. The Zephyrians possessed 4 compound eyes that could track movement across a wide field, but they seemed to struggle with Earth's light spectrum. During the golden hour before sunset, when human vision was at its sharpest, the aliens moved clumsily, often bumping into obstacles or missing obvious details. They relied heavily on thermal imaging devices that detected heat signatures, but Emma had learned to mask her body temperature using techniques Abuelo had taught her, covering herself in mud, moving slowly to avoid generating excess heat, and using the cold granite boulders as thermal camouflage. Most importantly, Emma realized that these creatures had never encountered a persistence hunter. In all their conquered worlds, the Zephyrians had faced 2 types of enemies: ambush predators who struck once and retreated, or pack hunters who relied on overwhelming numbers. They had never fought a species that could pursue a target relentlessly across vast distances, wearing down their prey through sheer determination rather than brute force. Humans were unique in the galaxy in this regard. While other species had evolved as sprinters, explosive bursts of speed followed by necessary rest periods, humans had developed the ability to maintain pursuit across continents. Emma might weigh less than 70 pounds, but she carried within her DNA the legacy of ancestors who had hunted mammoth across ice ages and tracked wounded game for days across African savannas. The aliens never expected to be hunted. They assumed apex predator status wherever they went, and their behavior reflected this arrogance. They never watched their backs. They never varied their routes. They never posted lookouts in elevated positions because, in their experience, threats always came from ground level. On the second night, Emma tested their response time. She threw a rock at their supply cache from a concealed position, then melted back into the forest shadows. The reaction was immediate but predictable. For guards converged on the sound's origin point, energy weapons raised, sweeping the area in a standard search pattern. They found nothing, of course, because Emma was already 200 yards away, watching them through borrowed binoculars she'd retrieved from an abandoned campsite. But more importantly, she timed their response. 43 seconds from initial sound to full deployment. She noted their search pattern, concentric circles expanding outward from the disturbance point. She observed their communication protocol. Hand signals followed by electronic bursts to their command post. By the third day, Emma had constructed a complete tactical profile of her enemies. She knew their shift changes, their equipment loadouts, their standard operating procedures, and their physical limitations. She had identified 17 individual aliens by their distinctive armor markings and behavioral quirks. She had mapped their supply lines, their communication networks, and their defensive positions. Most importantly, she had identified the perfect target for her first strike. A scout who habitually took a smoking break at 0300 hours, always in the same location, always alone, always looking down at his communication device instead of scanning for threats. Emma Rodriguez was no longer hiding in the forest. She was hunting. At 0245 hours on the third night, Emma Rodriguez positioned herself in the ancient Douglas fir that overlooked Scout designation ZX-7's regular smoking position. She had spent 2 hours climbing to her perch, moving one branch at a time with the patience Abuelo had drilled into her during their countless hunting expeditions. In her small hands, she gripped a spear she had crafted from a fallen oak branch. 2 feet of hardwood sharpened to a needle point using granite stones, and finished with pine pitch to prevent the tip from splintering. The alien arrived precisely on schedule. ZX-7 was a creature of habit, always choosing the same fallen log, always facing away from the main camp, always absorbed in his personal communication device during these breaks. The blue glow from his screen illuminated the gap in his neck armor, the vulnerable spot Emma had identified during her reconnaissance. From 30 feet above, Emma controlled her breathing the way her grandfather had taught her during deer season. "One shot, Mija." Abuelo's voice echoed in her memory. "Make it clean. Make it count. The animal deserves your respect, and you deserve to succeed." She dropped like a falling pine cone. The sharpened oak branch punched through the joint where ZX-7's helmet met his chest armor, severing whatever passed for a spinal cord in Zephyrian anatomy. The alien died instantly, his 4 compound eyes going dark before he could even register the attack. Emma landed beside the body in a controlled roll, just as Abuelo had taught her during their weekend training sessions. Working with mechanical efficiency, she stripped the corpse of its energy weapon and communication device, memorizing the control layouts through touch. The weapon was surprisingly light, clearly designed for Zephyrian physiology, but the trigger mechanism was simple enough for human fingers to operate. The communicator was more complex, covered in symbols she couldn't read, but she had observed enough to understand its basic functions. Within 90 seconds of the kill, Emma had vanished back into the forest darkness, leaving behind only a corpse that wouldn't be discovered until the next shift change 4 hours later. The Zephyrian response was swift and predictable. By dawn, 20 additional troops had been deployed to the area, their search patterns expanding in concentric circles from the kill site. They found nothing. No footprints in the hard granite soil, no broken branches, no trace of human presence. The angle of the wound suggested an attack from above, but their thermal scans revealed no heat signatures in the canopy. Subcommander Crixtel examined the scene personally, her claws tracing the fatal wound with professional curiosity. "Primitive weapon," she reported to Commander Vexthor via encrypted channel. "Sharpened wood, approximately 5 centimeters of penetration." The strike was precise. Whoever did this understood Zephyrian anatomy. "Impossible," Vexthor's voice crackled through the communicator. "These humans barely understand their own anatomy. How could they know our weak points?" The second kill came 26 hours later. Scouts YX-4 and NZ-12 were conducting a routine perimeter sweep when YX-4 simply vanished. One moment he was examining footprints near the old campground, the next he was gone. NZ-12 found his partner's body 40 meters away, hidden in a natural depression and covered with pine needles. Another precise wound, another stolen weapon, another impossible disappearance. This time, Emma had used the captured energy weapon, learning its operation through trial and error during her practice sessions in remote forest clearings. The weapon fired silent bolts of coherent energy that left no ballistic signature, perfect for stealth operations. She had waited until YX-4 separated from his partner by exactly 30 meters, then eliminated him during the brief window when neither alien could see the other. By the third day, 3 more Zephyrians had died. Each kill was different. A sniper shot from an impossible distance, a booby trap fashioned from captured explosives, a close-quarters assassination using a combat knife taken from an abandoned camping supply store. Emma was learning, adapting, evolving her tactics with each encounter. The psychological impact on the surviving aliens was devastating. These were hardened warriors who had conquered 47 worlds, veterans of campaigns against species far more advanced than humanity. But they had never faced an enemy like this. A ghost who struck without warning, who seemed to anticipate their every move, who possessed an intimate knowledge of terrain they couldn't navigate. "Sir," reported Tactical Officer Breezenex during the evening briefing, "the troops are requesting reassignment. They're calling it the Forest Phantom, some kind of supernatural entity that exists only to kill Zephyrians. Commander Vexthor's mandibles clicked in frustration. Deploy the elite guard. 12 of my finest warriors. Whatever this thing is, they'll find it and destroy it. In her forest sanctuary, Emma Rodriguez cleaned her grandfather's hunting knife and prepared for the greatest challenge of her young life. She was no longer just surviving. She was at war. By the end of the first week, Emma Rodriguez had killed 17 Zephyrian soldiers, but more importantly, she had begun to understand something her grandfather had tried to teach her during their conversations about Vietnam. War wasn't just about destroying the enemy's body. It was about breaking their will to fight. The mind is the real battlefield, Mija, Abuelo had told her one evening as they sat by their campfire, his weathered hands sketching tactical diagrams in the dirt. You can kill a man's body, but if you kill his spirit first, you've already won. In the jungle, we learned that fear was more powerful than any bullet. Emma put this philosophy into devastating practice. She began leaving messages using the alien communication devices she'd captured, painstakingly learning basic Zephyrian symbols by observing their transmissions. Her first message was simple, transmitted on their emergency frequency during their sleep cycle. You are being hunted. The words were crude, her pronunciation fractured, but the meaning was unmistakable. The next night, she escalated. Using a combination of captured weapons and forest materials, Emma started moving bodies in ways that defied explanation. Scout NX-9's corpse was found arranged in a meditation pose at the exact center of their supply depot, his weapons laid out in precise geometric patterns around him. There were no footprints leading to or from the body, no disturbance in the surrounding area, as if he had simply appeared there like a macabre sculpture. 2 days later, an entire patrol team vanished overnight, only to have their helmets discovered the following morning arranged in a perfect circle around the aliens' command post. The helmets were unmarked, polished clean, and positioned with mathematical precision. Security footage revealed nothing. The cameras simply showed empty space. Then suddenly the helmets were there, as if materialized from thin air. Emma had spent hours studying the camera angles, identifying blind spots and timing windows. She moved between surveillance zones like a dancer performing choreography, exploiting the microsecond gaps in coverage that the aliens' rigid security protocols created. Her small size became a tactical advantage. She could fit through spaces the larger aliens couldn't even see, moving beneath their technology's limitations. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. The Zephyrian troops in Sector 7 began showing signs of acute stress that their medical officers couldn't explain. Sleep cycles were disrupted. Patrol efficiency dropped by 30%. Equipment malfunctions began occurring with suspicious frequency as nervous soldiers handled their weapons with shaking claws. It's like fighting a supernatural entity, reported Sergeant Vex Mali during his psychological evaluation. Something that exists outside the laws of physics. We've conquered worlds with armies of millions, but this is different. It knows us better than we know ourselves. Emma enhanced the terror by targeting their sense of security in increasingly creative ways. Weapons would disappear from supposedly secure armories, only to be found days later embedded in trees hundreds of meters away. Supply drops would be tampered with, rations replaced with forest flowers, ammunition magazines filled with acorns and pine needles. The message was clear. Nowhere was safe, nothing was secure, and the forest itself had become their enemy. She learned to mimic their own communication protocols, sending false orders that led patrols into carefully prepared ambush zones. Using captured voice modulators, she broadcast phantom distress calls that scattered response teams across the wilderness on futile rescue missions. The aliens began to distrust their own equipment, their own commands, their own senses. The breaking point came when Emma discovered their psychological weakness. Zephyrians were hive-minded creatures who found isolation terrifying. She began picking off soldiers one by one, always leaving a single survivor to witness the aftermath. These traumatized witnesses returned to base with wild stories of impossible attacks, of a predator that struck like lightning and vanished like smoke. The creature appears to be studying us, reported Chief Medical Officer Dexthal in her daily briefings. Each attack is more sophisticated than the last, as if it's learning our weaknesses and exploiting them systematically. But that's impossible. No primitive species possesses that level of tactical intelligence. Commander Vexthor was forced to make an unprecedented decision. For the first time in Zephyrian military history, an elite guard unit was being deployed not to conquer new territory, but to hunt a single enemy. 12 of the Empire's finest warriors, veterans of the bloodiest campaigns in galactic history, were being assigned to eliminate what their intelligence reports described as one small human juvenile. In her forest sanctuary, Emma monitored their communications and smiled with grim satisfaction. She had transformed from prey to predator, from victim to the nightmare that stalked alien dreams. The psychological war was working exactly as Abuelo had taught her it would. Fear, she had learned, was indeed more powerful than any weapon. 3 weeks after the invasion began, the Zephyrian occupation force was hemorrhaging from an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't track, and couldn't comprehend. The mighty war machine that had crushed 47 civilizations was being systematically dismantled by something their most advanced tactical computers classified as impossible threat parameters. It wasn't Earth's scattered military resistance that was breaking them. Most human armies had been overwhelmed within the first 48 hours. It wasn't advanced technology or superior firepower. It was Emma Rodriguez, an 8-year-old girl who had become something beyond their understanding. A force of nature that existed solely to destroy them. The elite guard unit had lasted 6 days. 12 of the Zephyrian Empire's finest warriors, each a veteran of campaigns that had reduced entire star systems to ash, had been eliminated with methodical precision. Their bodies were discovered one by one, scattered across 50 square miles of Montana wilderness, each death more psychologically devastating than the last. The first elite guardsman, Kexthuval the Destroyer, had been found hanging upside down from a cliff face, his armor removed piece by piece and arranged below him like a metal flower. The second, Nixtaron the Beast Slayer, was discovered sitting peacefully by a mountain stream. His weapons cleaned and stacked beside him, a crown of wildflowers placed on his severed head. Emma had evolved beyond simple elimination tactics. Each kill had become a work of art, a message written in alien blood that spoke to primal fears buried deep in the Zephyrian psyche. She had learned their cultural taboos by monitoring their horrified communications, understanding instinctively which arrangements would maximize psychological trauma. The breakthrough had come during her study of captured equipment manuals. Zephyrians, she discovered, revered geometric perfection. Their entire culture was built around mathematical precision and ordered symmetry. So Emma began creating chaos. Bodies left in impossible angles. Equipment arranged in patterns that hurt alien minds to perceive. Weapons embedded in trees to form symbols that violated every principle of Zephyrian aesthetic philosophy. By the 3rd week, the mere mention of Sector 7 caused physical reactions in Zephyrian soldiers. 3 attempts to establish forward operating bases had failed when entire construction crews simply abandoned their posts and fled. Psychological evaluations revealed unprecedented levels of trauma among the surviving troops. The entity appears to be learning at an exponential rate, reported Dr. Vex Psyche, the Empire's leading military psychiatrist, during her emergency consultation with Command. Each engagement demonstrates increased sophistication in both tactical execution and psychological manipulation. We're not dealing with a primitive human. We're facing something that understands warfare on a level we've never encountered. Commander Vexthor had been forced to implement unprecedented security measures. Patrols now traveled in groups of 20, never fewer. No soldier was permitted to operate alone under any circumstances. Sleep cycles were conducted in full armor with weapons ready. The command post was relocated 3 times after supply officers reported finding small human footprints inside supposedly secure perimeters. But even these measures proved inadequate. Emma had begun infiltrating their communications, not just jamming them but actively participating in command conferences. Her voice, a child's voice speaking fractured Zephyrian, would suddenly interrupt tactical briefings with simple statements that froze hardened warriors with terror. I see you. Your armor has weak points. Tonight, someone dies. The psychological warfare reached its apex when Emma orchestrated her masterpiece of terror. Using captured explosives and precisely timed diversions, she managed to spell out a message visible from orbit using controlled detonations across the forest canopy. The burning letters, each 100 meters tall, were clearly visible to the fleet overhead. "Leave or all die." The message remained visible for 3 days, a constant reminder that their enemy possessed capabilities that defied every military doctrine in Zephyrian history. Commander Vexthor made the decision that would haunt him for the rest of his career. He would personally lead a massive assault, 300 troops, the largest ground force ever assembled for a single target. Every thermal scanner, every motion detector, every piece of advanced surveillance equipment in the fleet would be deployed. The forest would be swept methodically, grid by grid, until the threat was eliminated. It was a decision born of desperation, pride, and the growing realization that his entire invasion force was being terrorized by something that shouldn't exist. In her forest sanctuary, Emma monitored their communications and began preparing for the greatest challenge of her young life. She had pushed them to their breaking point, and now they were coming with everything they had. But Emma Rodriguez had learned something the Zephyrians never would. In war, the side that refuses to break always wins. And she would never, ever break. As Commander Vexthor's 300 warriors surrounded the Montana wilderness at dawn, something extraordinary was happening across the planet. Emma's legend had transcended the boundaries of Sector 7, spreading through underground networks, resistance cells, and whispered conversations in occupied territories. The story of a human child who had single-handedly terrorized an alien army had become more than inspiration. It had become a blueprint for resistance. In the ruins of Tokyo, a group of survivors used Emma's psychological warfare tactics to drive an entire Zephyrian garrison to madness, leaving bodies arranged in impossible patterns until the aliens abandoned their positions. In the Australian outback, Aboriginal trackers applied her hit-and-run techniques, turning the vast landscape into a graveyard for alien patrols. Across 6 continents, humanity was learning that advanced technology meant nothing against the human spirit's refusal to surrender. But Emma didn't wait for reinforcements. As 300 of the galaxy's most elite soldiers entered her domain, she initiated the deadliest game of predator and prey in human history. For 3 weeks, she had been preparing the forest for this moment, transforming every tree, every boulder, every stream into components of a vast killing machine. Deadfall traps lined the ancient game trails, their triggers calibrated to respond to Zephyrian weight distributions. Punji stakes fashioned from fire-hardened oak waited in carefully camouflaged pits, their tips coated with poison extracted from local mushrooms. The aliens' own captured energy weapons had been jury-rigged into improvised explosive devices, their power cells overloaded and positioned at strategic choke points. But her greatest preparation was psychological. Emma had studied these warriors through weeks of observation, learning not just their tactical patterns but their individual personalities, their fears, their breaking points. She knew which ones were veteran commanders who would fight to the death, and which were young soldiers who could be broken by the right application of terror. The battle began at sunrise with a series of coordinated explosions that eliminated the Zephyrians' heavy equipment. Emma had spent days infiltrating their staging areas, placing charges with surgical precision. Vehicles, communication arrays, and medical stations vanished in balls of fire, leaving the invaders stranded in hostile territory with no support and no way to call for extraction. Then the real hunt began. Emma moved through the forest like a living embodiment of Earth's fury. She struck from impossible angles, dropping from cliff faces, emerging from underground tunnels she had excavated during sleepless nights, materializing from camouflaged positions that defied detection. Her weapons were everything and anything: captured alien technology, improvised explosives, fire-hardened spears. Even the forest itself turned into instruments of death. By noon, Vexthor had lost 50 troops. By sunset, half his force was gone. The survivors huddled in defensive circles, their energy weapons sweeping frantically at shadows that might or might not contain death. Every tree could hide a sniper. Every boulder could conceal an explosive. Every sound could herald their doom. The commander himself began to crack as reports poured in from his decimated units. Entire squads were vanishing without a trace. Bodies were being discovered arranged in patterns that spoke to fears older than civilization. Some soldiers simply dropped their weapons and ran, their minds snapped by horrors they couldn't comprehend. "Sir," his communications officer whispered, his voice trembling with barely controlled panic. "We're receiving surrender requests from multiple units. They're asking permission to abandon the field." Vexthor stared at the tactical display showing his forces scattered and broken across 50 square miles of nightmare terrain. In 40 years of military service, he had never retreated from any battle. But this wasn't a battle. This was a slaughter orchestrated by something that existed beyond his understanding of warfare. The final blow came at midnight when Emma's voice echoed through their communication channels, speaking perfect Zephyrian with the cold certainty of inevitable death. "You came to my world. You threatened my family. Now you die in my forest, one by one, until none remain." As explosions lit up the darkness around them and screams echoed through the trees, Commander Vexthor made the decision that would echo through galactic history. Keying his emergency command frequency, he transmitted the order that no Zephyrian commander had ever given. "All units, immediate retreat to extraction points. Full withdrawal from planetary surface. Repeat, abandon the surface." The mighty Zephyrian invasion fleet fled Earth's orbit within hours, their departure so hasty they left behind equipment, wounded soldiers, and their military reputation. As their ships disappeared into hyperspace, emergency broadcasts were already spreading across the galaxy's communication networks. "Warning to all civilizations. Avoid the third planet of the Sol system. The species there produces children that are monsters." Emma Rodriguez stood at the edge of her forest as the alien ships vanished among the stars. An 8-year-old girl who had just reminded the galaxy why humans were the most terrifying predators it had ever encountered. She wasn't the strongest species or the fastest or the most technologically advanced, but she possessed something that made her unstoppable. The absolute, unbreakable refusal to surrender. In the distance, the first human military units were arriving to retake their world. But the real victory had already been won by a child who understood that the hunt, the eternal, relentless hunt, belonged to humanity alone.